Jay. My name is Joe Gorman. I work for the Michigan Department of Transportation in our ITS program office. My job specifically focuses on connected vehicles and building the foundational elements of a mature ITS program, so specs, details, all these deployment policies, and technical support for any type of deployment. As Jay mentioned, we did our first couple verifications with CAMP using their the more initial version of their document. So a lot of this I tried to make sure it wasn't too similar. So I'm going to kind of present what we've learned from leading up to the deployments that we could verify, and some things we learned during the deployments that may be, or during the verifications that may be helpful for other people as they are deploying and verifying. So there's three levels that you're verifying. You're verifying the system level, which is the communication between the RSU and the controller. The message level, which is kind of your over-the-air messages. These are the message sets that you need for your applications, and then the standards that define those and the elements within those, and the application level, which are the data elements of those applications or of those messages that are needed for the applications. Really, as a infrastructure owner operator, we don't make vehicles. We're not, in there. We have partners that do those things. So, you'll have to work with your partners to really test or understand the application level. We did 3 types of intersections. The first 2 were with Jay. They were large 8-lane cross sections with divided medians, indirect lefts. And we recently tested one that we deployed for ITS America. And it's Jefferson Avenue, Detroit, from Griswold to Bobby, and there are 5 intersections on that corridor, and it is by far one of the most complex areas we probably could have tried. There's an international border crossing, a pedestrian mall, an underground parking area that's accessible through the median. So we did not do ourselves any favor in terms of simplicity to the test. So what we learned at the system level leading up to the deployment and the verification is that the communication that we're testing is between the signal controller and the RSU, but a lot of the communication that was necessary was between our signals unit and our ITS unit, which deploys the RSUs, and understanding how their business process works and how we can establish a kind of joint business process to enable SPaT at intersections. Something we had to do was coordinate with them to ensure that our traffic controller specification moving forward supported the necessary elements to have a SPaT broadcast. So we did a little refresh to our signal specification to ensure that we wouldn't have to continue to procure special equipment or worry about this in the future as we go to deploy this. As a result of that, there was a policy that all traffic signals that were new or upgraded on the MDOT system would be enabled for CV applications. As Jay mentioned, and I think there was another webinar about this too, there's really no super standard. There's 2 standards, but they're implemented in different RSUs, and different signal control manufacturers may have a different output from the controller to the RSU, and that may be a factor in how things work. So it's a good place to start, and just talk to your vendors, understand what's going on. Most things are settling down now. It's a little less complicated than it was a few years ago, but it's still something to watch out for, especially if you have some slightly older hardware in the field that may have claimed to be SPaT enabled or something, and you purchase a new RSU to go out there. You're going to want to make sure everything matches up. We've also found that sometimes a little bit older hardware can be modified with a firmware update to support brand new SPaT applications, so you might not have to upgrade your hardware to support this. The coordinating with your traffic signal staff is very, very important if you guys aren't the same unit, or even if you are in a slightly divided unit. But a lot of stuff that as a primarily ITS engineer I do not understand about signals. As much as I wish this all was plug and play right now, it's not necessarily that simple. So understanding what's going on out there, what you can expect out of that controller, is a lot of things with the coordinated systems that they have. If you're not including all the optional data elements where you may be expecting a countdown and something will happen with detection, and this the phase will cut short and you think something's wrong with the broadcast because it didn't do what it said, but in reality that's exactly what the system was supposed to be doing, you just weren't aware of it. So that coordination is very important. The message level verification, as Jay mentioned, I'm sure it's been hammered home many times by now, looking for SPaT 2735, 2016, the March version of that. For any over-the-air broadcast, everything should be encoded and formatted to those standards. What we learned on our intersections was that the version control, especially if your over-the-air stuff, is very important, especially if you've deployed early hardware. We've got a number of early deployments and test beds and stuff that are all using slightly different versions. As Jay mentioned, we even had some kind of half upgraded some stuff in 2016, but using 15 data elements. So we're working on getting establishing some best practices of finding those older versions and making sure everything gets upgraded and making sure the controllers and everything can support that. So that'll solve a lot of problems from the desk before you get out in the field. The other one is understanding the level of accuracy you need for your maps and what messages you need in there, what individual data elements you need in there, and making sure everything's properly encoded based on the distance that you need, your approach distance. The encoding per the standard changes what format it is in depending on how long that approach is and the distance between the nodes. As Jay mentioned, the optional SPaT and map data elements that you may need if you're running a coordinated system, or depending on what application you want to support, you're going to want to make sure that everything that you need is there, even if it is optional. And that may involve talking to a RSU vendor or controller vendor to make sure that's actually in there, because you can support the standard with all the required elements and not the optional elements that may be critical for your application. You need to establish best practices for map data collection, especially when you're dealing with really complex intersections. It's fairly easy to understand your approach and egress lanes and the lane use and kind of the phase to lane mapping for a fairly simple intersection. When you're getting into larger complex corridors with dedicated lanes that might not go all the way through the intersection, multiple signal heads, indirect left turns, tight intersection spacing, you're going to really want to look at how you're laying out your signal group IDs, what your intersection reference IDs are looking like. Per the standard, those are supposed to be kind of a unique reference with a regional and then a kind of unique sequential ID on there. That way, not only can you keep everything straight, but when you're out there testing, you have a really good idea of what you're looking at, because from any given location you may be picking up more than one intersection, so you don't want to be saying, oh, this is all wrong, because you're looking at the next intersection down the road and it's not matching what's in front of you. Oh, looks like I may have lost some slides for some reason. Well, what was here was there was a nice 3 blocks. The top block was application level, and the bottom was a system and message, and these arrows kind of went from the application to the system level. What I wanted to say with that was just that when you are defining your applications, that may come back to the supporting elements of the system and the message. So you may have to kind of work in a loop or an iterative process to understand that for one application you may have the right data elements, but you may need to go through and you might find in your verification that for another application you want to support, you may need to go back to the system and back to the message level to make sure that everything's supported. A good example is you can have signal phasing and timing out there, but if you want to do like a signal request or some kind of signal priority messaging, you may need to go all the way back to the system and make sure that the controller hardware can support that, and that you have an established application at the system level, even if the message and the application exist. Some other lessons we learned there, again, were the optional data elements must be included. So, talking to all your vendors for all levels and any partners you may have that are building applications, or if you're working on building a specific application, really understanding what you need. Just saying that, oh yeah, it's in the standard really isn't enough, because there are a number of optional elements that are very important for a number of applications. When you're laying everything out, something we learned on the tight urban corridor spacing is that you may need long approaches and they may overlap, which is going to look very confusing to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, and that's again where those, defining those ID elements is really important, so you can keep track of that and make sure that the vehicle can also keep track of that. Something I ran into also in these kind of tight areas is establishing a best practices for like messages along a corridor. You may want to split up your SPaT on one channel and your map on the other. There is no real standard for that. The FCC defines channel 172 as registered specifically for safety of life applications. So you see a lot of it's kind of de facto standard that you're broadcasting SPaT on that, but that's not necessarily any established standard anywhere, and that's the same for if you want to go in and you want to do a travel information message or something. It may vary, so kind of establishing what you're going to do in the area, so what people can expect. You'll have other vendors that you might not even know about driving around out there listening to your messages and saying, well, I was looking for this over here, where is it? And you say, oh, well, it's actually on 184. Did you look there? And they say, well, no, I wasn't expecting it. So it's easy to have that. If you have that catalog, or at least have a best practices document, it's easy to distribute. And then with that, just kind of understanding what's out there. You may have a number of people, as we do in the Southeast Michigan area, developing applications that may drive by. They know the test bed is out there or something, and they're looking to see what's available, and they're going to ask a lot of questions. And understanding exactly where you are from, SCAJ 2735 version support through, SCMS or any kind of security credentialing support, or, PSID supported. All that information is good to have, kind of in your back pocket, so you can keep it straight on anyone else, driving by trying to use it can take a look at that. Just included some quick resources here. There's the SAE standard, the FCC actual rules in the Federal Register for, or Code of Federal Regulations for channel allocation, and the link to the FCC Universal Licensing System.